In these cases, these are all cases, like even my own case, where the mothers were unmarried at the time of adoption, when they were forced to part with their children and babies.
Hi, welcome to Switching Mindsets. This is Anuradha, and I'm speaking to Arun Dohle, founder director of Against Child Trafficking, a globally recognized nonprofit that works to prevent child trafficking for inter-country adoption, and Adoptee Rights Council. Hi, Arun. Wonderful to have you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So, I want to start with how I decided to get in touch with you. I read about Natasha's story in the Indian Express and how your team and advocate Anjali Pawar, who you also work with at Adoptee Rights Council, how you helped her get in touch and find her birth parents. And you also have a similar story. So I saw your website where where it says that you have 25 years of expertise, and then it took you 17 years to track down your own birth mother. So you help people do that. So first of all, could we start with how you helped Natasha, and then later you could tell me your own story? Yeah.
So basically, Natasha traveled on her own to India and tried to search. But the orphanage, even though it's mandated in the adoption regulation 2022, and the earliest as well, the orphanage did not assist her. And then she found us, contacted us, and we conducted the search. Um, like it's written in the article also, we really fought hard to get access to the file, which was not easy, but we managed, and we then were able to trace Natasha's mother. And the orphanage was actually lying. They were saying, lying towards the government even, that Natasha's mother would not want to wish to meet Natasha, but it wasn't like that when we traced the mother. In these cases, these are all cases, like even my own case, where the mothers were unmarried at the time of adoption, when they were forced to part with their children and babies. It is a very tragic story, but it is systematic. So in most of our societies, even the Western societies, are patriarchal societies. And even at least originally, now there's a little bit more equality, but it's also not perfect. So, but unmarried motherhood was just a few decades ago also a taboo in Western and Christian societies. It's not accepted. And it is still the same in India. There's not much change. And obviously, it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the same thing. So it's always the same story. It is a love affair between two young people. Things happen. It is sexual abuse in some cases by relatives or other people. Happens. I mean, we all know how women get pregnant. So, but in that case, there are then somehow getting in touch through the doctors, through relatives, through whatever, with these orphanages, which dress up as social work organizations. But what they in fact do is they separate the mothers and the babies, not only one, but systematically. And then we adoptees, victims of that, we are secret. The woman basically gets married. The parents in India, the parents will usually arrange a marriage. And because this was already a fallen woman, right? In these cases, even the families do not that much of effort to find a good husband for the women. But the women are getting married and doing their work and job and duty as a mother and husband and mother to their new children anyway. This is a situation. So at the end of the day, it's a woman who runs the household. And yeah, so they have not much say still in India. And but they run it. And in these cases, you have to be very careful. You cannot just knock on the door and tell her husband and the children, hey, hello, I'm here. I'm the secret child your mother had before marriage. You cannot do that. You cannot victimize the mothers a second time. You have to be careful, and it's not me who's doing the searches, it's my partner Anjali Pawar, who is a qualified lawyer and who is a qualified social worker, which I think is necessary in those cases. I don't think tourist guides or just volunteers who have no experience are the right people to do that work. And obviously, as we see also in Natasha's case, even the social workers of the orphanages are the wrong people because they don't know how to handle it. And secondly, they want to cover up the crime. Even though maybe a legal process was followed, so prima facie it looks all legal, but there was no consent, informed consent from the mothers. They were forced. And mothers across the globe now start actually, since 2-3 decades, actually start fighting that they say, we were forced to part with our children. And though maybe not directly criminal in law, because the adoption laws are designed like that. So if a signed paper is there and so-called surrender deed, or it's just basically a sheet of paper where the mother says, okay, I relinquish my child. If that is there, then these adoptions are considered legal. But how can something be legal like this? It's a crime against humanity because it's been done systematically. And the women have been forced. It's not that they voluntarily all happily gave up their children.
Yeah,
So
you've said.
many mothers we met tell very clearly that they asked the orphanage, the social work organization, to give them a job, to help them keep the child, and they were denied this option. So then they also sometimes think they made a decision themselves, but it's not a decision because it was not an option. There was no option.
So, when you say there was no option, what can be the option? Because in their case, they say that the mother left the baby at the orphanage. So you talked about, there not being any institutional substitute, right? For something like this.
I mean, in the West, feminists basically have been fighting, against the patriarchy. And then laws and policies have been changed. So basically, there is enforcement of child maintenance. So the father has to pay for the child maintenance. And their enforcement is quite good. And then also we have social security systems. So you can, even if you have a financial crisis and having a baby and working, it's not working, at least not initially. It's not, you cannot work full time, at least. And yeah, with a very small baby, you can't work really for a couple of weeks, months. So the period needs to be bridged. So we have a social security system where actually the housing is being paid and also the basic living costs are being paid. So there's basically really no one in the West anymore who, due to financial circumstances, has to part with a baby. And then, of course, it's not perfect in the West yet. I don't want to say that this is perfect, but single motherhood is accepted compared to India, where it's still not accepted. Compared to India, where a girl still has to get married latest at the age of 25 to 27. So this is the social conditions have been changed in the West.
In India, yeah, that'll take a long, long time. But hopefully things will change.
Yeah, but it is also a matter of policy. You have to give, as a government, you cannot allow crimes against humanity. There is a no-go. We criminalize killing of people. It's a pretty clear crime. We define this. It's a value. It's a law. I mean, we can also have another value and say killing is fine under this and that conditions, right? But separating mothers and children should be no-go.
Yeah.
And irrespectively of the social conditions or the social perspectives in a country like India, this is such a gross human rights violation that the Indian government cannot engage in this. And
Yeah.
they have also to compensate and take care of what they did to me and to Natasha or other adoptees. It's not that the Indian government can just say, "Oh, we don't care."
Yeah. Could you elaborate on that? Like you said, what they've done to you, and what do how can what is the change that you're expecting at the policy level? That you said various things, because you've been displaced, so everybody should get like an OCI, automatically.
And that is the
Yeah.
small thing. But,
Hmm.
India has a constitution. The constitution is quite good. Under the constitution, every citizen of India has a right to life. That is a very broad principle. But it means that I, as a child, or all the other children, or even you, in case there is something wrong, the state, means the Indian government, has to ensure that we have a right, that we stay alive. And as a baby and as a child, it's not like you can work or earn money and my own food. As a child, you're dependent on adults. But who has to fulfill this right? The state. And that means right to life means more than mere animal existence. So, first of all, a child needs his or her mother to survive. How many babies in these adoption mills, like puppy mills, just die because they are or have been deprived of being breastfed? It's like the chicken, on a row you have in some orphanages, you had these babies, and thousands of babies just died.
Yeah.
We are lucky we survived. And the baby dies without his or her mother. They're getting sick. They need the milk for
Yeah. The most basic. Yeah.
the most basic. So how could the government allow that? So the separation, no breastfeeding, it is a crime against humanity. First thing. Second thing is this not happen just on some illegal black market or something. It's a legalized market. So it was all supposed legal in line with the law. And we were all in licensed adoption agencies. They were all licensed. They were licensed mostly at that time. They were licensed orphanages under the Orphanage and Charitable Homes Act. There was, and then maybe some under the various Children's Act, but basically that was their main registration with the government. So they were an arm of the government. And we were in the state, in their care, like our mothers too. So we were in state care. Okay, now things happen. Sometimes maybe a mother didn't want to have the child or couldn't or whatever. But then still, so let's say, let's, for the sake of the debate, accept that it was necessary to separate the baby and the child. But then I and every other child and adoptee were in state care. So who's now responsible to take care of us? Our parents have been basically removed, or let's say left. That's also not the right word. And they have been basically mothers based on the fact that they were unmarried were denied motherhood. Not only in India, that was also in Ireland and Canada and Australia and Belgium and Germany. That is just one thing of patriarchy. Not even necessarily just religion, because it happens. Hinduism happens, Christianity. So who's then responsible to take care of us under the constitution? The state. So how can the state then export us to another country? The state was responsible to keep me alive, to fulfill my right to life, and that of all other children. Then how on earth could they deport me to Germany, or like in Natasha's case, Switzerland, or to other cases? And that is it. We really need to think about what happened there. And Indians have to think about what happened there. I understand that every Indian wants to go to Switzerland because they think they earn better there and life is better there, or the US. Everybody says, "Oh, well, you should be happy."
Yeah. So you spent 17 years looking for your birth mother, and you were a financial consultant before that, right?
Yes.
So, yeah. And so now, would it take somebody, since you've been running this organization for almost 25 years, I suppose. So, would it take somebody 17 years with your help and Anjali's help?
In
Has
some
the
cases,
process changed?
well, not much has changed. I mean, basically, it's a wall of secrecy which we meet. And so on paper, now there is an update. I mean, that came in response to my own case, which it was I fought up to the Supreme Court. So the Indian government couldn't really deny anymore that we also have rights. And it's a little bit better. There is some formal process in place, but in practice, it's the same. In practice, it's the same. And adoptee, typically Western adoptee, from the US or Europe, travels to India, they go to the orphanage, maybe through the authorities, exactly what happened in Natasha's case or others, and they basically follow some process and deny. At the end of the day, we also really need to respect our mothers. And it is the way this issue is being framed here is the right of the mothers to privacy versus the right of us to know our mothers. So the issue is being framed as a conflicting rights issue. Also, when you go to court, we did that in many cases, and this should not be. The mothers are victims, and we need to respect them. You cannot. It is just a matter of social fact. You cannot go in many cases and just tell the husband and the rest of the in-laws, "Hey, your virgin wife had a child before." You can't do that. So then we need to accept that and work with that, and also really see that the mothers were victims, we adoptees are victims, and then we have to mitigate that and find, like in Natasha's case, discrete meanings. There's no issue. There's an issue created because nobody actually wants to acknowledge that this was wrong, to separate mothers and children in the first place systematically. That is the issue, but that nobody wants to acknowledge. And that's why they actually create then a conflicting right issue, where I have to say, I mean, if it happens heart to heart, and even though I'm an adoptee and I fought my case up to the Supreme Court, I have seen the mothers now for years. I have to say, you cannot. That is what Western adoptees actually expect. They expect that they write to the Indian adoption agency or authority, and they will give their name and address of the mother, and then they can hire a tourist guide and go and knock the door of the mother. Yeah, I'm saying sorry, that's not possible. And it's also this, the Western people and organizations actually and governments actually also know that. So it is really perverse that they first made sure that we get taken out of India, separated from our mothers. So their money, actually, the Western money, fueled this market. And now they want to expose the mothers. They really want that. I have a German authority now. The German Central Authority basically wrote that to me, that they wish that they get the files. And then, yes, indeed, in Germany, there was a case some time back. So in Germany, you have a full unrestricted right to access the files. So the moment Indian authorities or the Indian orphanage would transfer the file to the German authorities,
yeah, there has to be a balance somewhere.
No, you don't need the balance.
Hmm.
No, that is exactly the wrong term, because again, we are in that quadrant of conflicting rights issues. You need to acknowledge that this was trafficking. And for me, most importantly, the Western government have to, not that I'm leaving the Indian authorities and the government of the hook, yeah, but I'm a German citizen. Natasha is a Swiss citizen. They're Belgian, US, and whatever citizens. And our rights have been violated. Yes, also by Indian authorities in instances, but primarily the money which separated us systematically from our others came from adoptive parents, again on the Western side through licensed and authorized agencies. So obviously the agencies are not all dead, but then the governments are responsible for having allowed this crime against humanity, and they have to come up with a redress scheme, and that includes to respect our mothers. It's not a matter of balance. It's a matter of doing the searches and the reunions and also the aftercare of that, doing it very professional and with respect.
Yeah. Could you explain the trafficking angle? Because, I was listening to your TED talk where you said that it's adoption is like ownership and it's like a replacement for modern slavery. So could you explain that for us to understand how, it all overlaps?
First of all the foreign adoptive parents, mostly, they paid money to an adoption agency. The adoption agency found people in India who set up orphanages and adoption agencies and separated us all from our families. So money there and you get a child. In layman's terms, this is selling of children or trafficking. Legally, it's a bit more complex. Because legally, there's supposedly the condition for exploitation and the intent of exploitation. And to prove exploitation, when you land up in a rather good, well-to-do, middle-class adoptive family, it's difficult, right? It's been seen as being good. But on the other hand, we became someone else. Our identities were changed. Like, I'm not Arun Dohle. I got from my mother another name. Dohle is the surname of my adoptive parents. I got a birth certificate, which I showed in the TEDx talk.
Yeah, Sadanand, right?
Yeah, Svanand is my original name. And my identity was changed. My Indian parents erased. And I'm supposedly born to two white German people. And then still I make always this joke, a little bit dirty, but I was thinking, what did they do in bad that I came out brown? It's like that, no?
Yeah.
I'm as if born to, and that is not only me, that is for every other person. So yes, I'm as if born to, and some jurisdictions, some countries allow to revoke or discharge the adoption. Australia allows it, for example, but Germany, for example, doesn't allow it. I will be always legally the child of my white adoptive parents, as if born to. Obviously, I'm not born to that. And that is ownership. And I don't want to compare it to slavery in the sense of what the African Americans.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Slavery. But I would term it a form of modern slavery.
Yeah, how is that? Because in your talk, you've said that, you have to fit in, you have to be this child of white parents. Was that tough, by the way, to grow up in a white household? And even Natasha has said that, obviously, brown skin and growing up in a white neighborhood. So it's difficult. When did you know that you were adopted? You're saying that, did you know from the start?
Yeah,
always, yeah.
Always, because they were white.
Yeah, obviously.
And I had to explain it. Obviously, children.
Yeah. At what age did you get that explanation?
Yeah, obviously, we inter-country adoptees, we all knew from childhood, which of course is different for domestic Indian adoptees. Many domestic Indian adoptees probably don't even know they're adopted. If I know a couple of cases where then later some neighbors or some other people in anger disclosed to the now grown-up child, anyway, you were adopted. But I think it's a large number of adult domestic Indian adoptees who don't even know that they were adopted.
So if, not to use the word slavery, but struggle, what is the struggle, that...
That really depends on case by case. For me, my adoptive parents were as good as parents as one can wish for, apart from the fact that they're not my parents. So I personally, now with more age and being back in India, see how, yeah, I mean, there's a total cultural difference. I'm completely German. Don't laugh, but I'm really German. I just don't look like. So it wasn't that much of a struggle, because as
Yeah.
children, as a child, you adapt, you attach, because that is what you need to survive. And for me, it wasn't that much of a struggle. But in hindsight, looking backwards, I can see how much I tried to be that Arun Dohle, that German guy, and obviously I have failed on all accounts. Didn't work out. I'm back in India, and I don't even look German yet. But you also have to really look at the fact that many of the adoptees also got into families where they were psychologically mistreated or abused, sexually abused. Sexual abuse is a very, very
Yeah.
dark and underreported chapter in adoption placement, as one calls it. So violence, everything is there. And that actually at a higher rate than in normal families. So almost every adoptee I speak to, specifically the female adoptees, after a while, when they open up, almost, I would say 80-90% have been sexually abused this way or the other.
Yeah.
It's a
Really?
huge,
That higher percentage?
there are no studies, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
So I can only say that from my daily contacts within the adoptee community. So and then really, I also think that there is racism in the Western countries, and you can see it now clearly that also in Europe and the US, where and now it's en vogue again to
Yeah.
insist on whiteness, and I mean these countries only for white people. It is became a very hostile environment for people of color. It wasn't that bad for me when I grew up as now, actually. I
Right.
think now, when I grew up in a leftist, liberal environment, so in a way, in a bubble. Sometimes, of course, I faced racism also, that where I was like, what the fuck? But, not that much.
Yeah.
But now it's like, if you go on social media or something, it's very clear where this goes.
Yeah, you can't escape it. You also mentioned a sense of erasure because you didn't know your language. You've also alienated from the Indian culture, right? So all
Yeah, I
of
still
also
don't
taken
know.
away. Yeah.
I still don't know Hindi. I still don't know Marathi, but of course, also it's not so easy to relearn. And also, I have a lot of work, so I don't have the peace of mind. So I don't speak Hindi and Marathi. And I
Right.
live in an area in Pune where basically the children are now speaking English a little bit more because they obviously get all educated in English. But basically, the people in my age or 10, 15 years younger, nobody speaks English. They may understand.
Yeah, yeah. So I found it very interesting that you met your biological mother and her husband, and she both invited you to
I would
stay
like
with him
to
when
say,
you're in India. Hmm.
I would like to say, when you say biological mother or birth mother, I understand that you want to differentiate between my adoptive mother and adoptive
Yeah,
parents.
I'd rather just say mother. Yeah.
It's my mother.
Okay, I will do that. Yeah.
If you differentiate for the sake of the conversation, then those who have adopted me, they are my parents.
Yeah.
And it is a basic mistake which is being made, that this is not just a biological womb, it's a mother, even though she has been denied motherhood by society and by trafficking.
Right. Yeah, as you said, she's a victim as much as you're a victim. Yeah. So, okay, so you met your mother, and what I found very interesting is that her husband and she both said that, you can stay with them when you visit.
Yeah,
So, how did that happen? That entire, because normally the women don't want to, as you said, let the husband know that they had a child before,
in
getting
my
married.
own case, it turns out to be quite interesting because my mother is a very strong woman. So she apparently told her husband before marriage about my existence.
Wow.
That is that is not the normal case in the Indian scenario. And she actually has a very nice husband also. So there she was lucky.
That's wonderful.
It is, I don't know whether it's wonderful. I think it's very tragic because it also means she never really came back to ask for me because I told her that she was believing I'm in some family in Pune and she didn't want to disturb my life.
Oh, so okay, okay.
So in fact, since she has told her that it happened, he accepted it. If this orphanage would have been a bit more, yeah,
Proactive, yeah.
I mean, if I wouldn't have been exported and the orphanage would have been kept in touch with her, I would have been raised by my mother and, okay, her then husband, which then would be my stepdad. So my
Yeah,
mother is,
yeah.
I mean, they're not rich people. They're normal, typical Indian middle class family. And obviously, middle class wasn't is always like it is today, when we talk about the 80s, 70s, but they're doing well. So they would have been able to raise me.
Of course. No, and that's what my first thought was also that, you shouldn't have spent 17 years looking for her because there was no secret that she was keeping from her family,
No, still her children didn't know, and some other relatives don't know. That's not, but it would not be. I mean, I came to India for the first time in 1993, and actually I searched obviously longer, but I wanted to know. I remember kind of 13, 14 when I wanted to go to India, actually, which was not possible. So that must have been around 1986, 1986. So it's more than 17 years. But, actively searching, I started in 93. And when the orphanage basically had a name and address, so they could have gone to her and searched for her instead of, opposing me in court and arguing right to privacy of my mother.
Yeah. So,
They actually fucked up my life
yes, absolutely.
on the first day, and then for actually not disclosing anything, and similar other organizations involved, like International Social Service. They're really sorry, pardon my French, but they fucked up my life, and that of many.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, how was it, like you said, at the age of around 14 or something, you felt that urge to, start searching for your mother. And so what was that feeling that you had then? And has that feeling been replaced by something more hopeful, something warmer now that you've met her?
It's an urge which you cannot explain to people who don't know how it is to not know your your genetic, biological family when you have been separated. You can imagine, I always compare it to the fact when your child goes missing. Your child goes missing. If a child dies, you can mourn. I mean, it happens, it's part of life. It's tragic, but you can mourn it. Once you have a family member going missing, you can't just go on. It will always be there on your mind, specifically if it's your child. And now a mother and child bond is very strong. I mean, we've grown in the womb of our mothers for 9 months. But there's a spiritual connection as well, and physical. So you cannot describe that urge. But it's not only I don't want to glorify the mother and child bond, over glorify it, because you also have to see that those people who were conceived via donor conception, basically sperm donation, so we cannot really argue with the child having been in the womb, because it was just sperm donation, right? It's just a sperm provider. But there's more to all that because, like adult adoptees, these donor conceived persons also fight, litigate, search for their fathers. So when you say biologically or genetics, there seems to be more than just a sperm.
Yeah. So, so now how do you feel now that you've met your mother?
It's difficult to say because also there are questions about my father's which are still open.
Yeah. You're still, I was going to ask about that too. So you're still searching? Yeah.
Yeah, well, not, I'm searching for answers.
Okay.
So that is still not solved. And yeah, I still can't communicate with my mother. She speaks Marathi. My mother tongue is German. So there's lots of things which are yeah, and obviously I'm in Pune, I'm in India, and I work on these things. So I get a very it's not like it's not a very happy feeling, even though I found my mother back. But it's not, but then it's also for many adoptees also difficult to travel to India. Now for me it's easy, but also it comes with surprise that I've lost my life in Germany. So there's no justice and there's no acknowledgement. There's neither justice for the wrongdoing in my own case or in others, nor is there an apology, nor is there any form of justice. It's like when you look at, take Natasha's case as example because it's a Swiss case. So in Switzerland, there was a study done, initiated by the government, which indeed confirms everything I say since 2 decades. It confirms they have looked into 50 cases, and they also, Switzerland after all, right? So they just stop short saying it's a crime against humanity to separate mothers like this. But they also have not found or spoken to one Indian mother. They have also not consulted us, by the way. We could have given them direct access to actual mothers we found back. They have never met, despite their Western budget, they have refused to speak to us. And that is actually what concerns me the most, that we are just treated like shit, and our mothers too. And that becomes more and more clear.
Yeah. So tell me, you've met a lot of mothers like this. What do they say about this? Is there anything that's comes out?
It is very depends on case by case, but essentially they also had nobody to speak with it about it. The cases are all the same, as I said, specifically the unmarried mother cases. They are afraid that the secret comes out, so they're not they are going to fight. That indeed is going to take in India much more time, and then there are mothers who maybe well educated and migrated to the West, so they can think and read and go on the internet and read stuff. They're not the only mothers in this situation, so they obviously with the internet get connected. But then also those mothers of rather recent cases which we have met, they don't stand up and fight. They can't. The social ostracism or whatever would be proud too much. But this is really something which has to be dealt with on government level.
Right.
The government is not changing the policy. The opposite. The Indian government basically promises infertile couples children, and there are 40,000 waiting couples on the waiting list. But who's going to produce all the babies? We need a baby production center, I think. And since there's no baby production center, the agencies try somehow to get the babies and the children. But since actually can't really steal, it's been more difficult now to steal children than a few years ago. So there have been checks and balances to some extent. So it's not that easy like before anymore. But then people go on the black market, gray and black market, and buy babies in huge numbers, I think.
Yeah. So basically, inter-country adoption, like I was seeing, you've posted also that it's like masks legalize child trafficking quite often, right? And
Always,
yeah,
not quite often. It is always legalized child trafficking. You pay for a child, you get a child. That is the transaction.
right. You had submitted a report to the EU as well, right? What was that? Yeah.
The EU, European Union. Let me explain the background. It did not just submit a report. Basically, I'm just an adoptee, maybe quite dedicated and maybe quite capable, but I'm just that. I was a financial consultant. And I just wanted to find my mother. And I did not foresee what was waiting for me. And I was, I would say, what one would term a happy adoptee. I just wanted to find my mother. And I was content with my adoption, and it was normal for me. It also didn't strike my mind really much that, okay, yeah, fine. It's like that in India, mothers can. So that was my attitude. And then I started traveling to India and I started researching the background of the adoptions. And since 1996, there were been huge scandals in the state of Andhra Pradesh of child trafficking. And these licensed agencies were really buying and selling babies, basically from the Lambada community, under the guise of saving those babies, because indeed, also in these Lambada communities, that the other side of the coin, that were killing female babies. While also, obviously, all across India, many females are already killed in the womb, which also shouldn't be. But it is also an issue. It's not just these communities who do that then on the baby when it comes out, but yeah. So they were combating that by buying those babies, which was then and faking records and whatever. So when I was traveling or starting researching that, I got in touch with those activists who've been working on these issues. And then I started slowly to understand what the hell. And that was also then, my idea that when Western authorities understand what actually happens on the ground, we in the West are very good. Indians are brown, dirty, and that's the and corrupt. That's a Western perspective of our country. So obviously I'm white, no, with a white shirt only, but I'm white, so I'm the same. I'm German. So I really came with German eyes to India. And then I thought if I bring these reports and things and facts to Western authorities would properly act. I also found cases of children being kidnapped from Chennai, from poor parents, outright kidnapped on the road. And then that was 2005, and then processed for adoption to Australia, to the Netherlands, and the United States. So I suddenly uncovered what is behind this glorious facade of saving children and giving them a better life and rescuing them from a third world country. When I say third world country, I mean it because that's how the West looks at India. That's how I was basically taught about India. Or many of us, adoptees, we think about India as the country of beggars. That's what we've been taught. And that there's no life for people like us. Or there's no life for girls. Women have no rights. There would be, if you would not have been adopted, you would land up in prostitution. That is what girls are being taught. Many.
Yeah.
That is the perception of India. But, then I discovered these cases and I went to the Western government, German government, here specifically the Netherlands government. So journalists were actually picking up my research. And also in India, here in Pune, was an orphanage called Preet Mandir, which was, indulging nicely in trafficking of children, outright bribing people, fabricating paperwork, and exploiting these unmarried mothers and, basically violating every adoption law in the country. So CNN IBN in 2006 started doing an investigation into Preet Mandir. Somehow I got to know it. They were quite surprised I got to know the secret investigation, but I was investigating myself. So you figure that out. So, and then they wanted to do a balanced story. This was a good side, but they also, some people from the adoption business were pissed that they didn't get any children anymore because Preet Mandir was buying them. And also pissed that, they were really having it in a bad way, right? Other adoption agencies were operating the same way, but at least not that overdoing it.
Yeah.
Was overdoing it. So government authorities actually leaked a pile of documents to them. So they had that pile of documents, but still they wanted to do a balanced story until they met me. So I met them, I gave them all my years of research, in fact, and then they understood what racket it is. And at that time, there were new channel, right? It was new news channels. So they had a lot of resources, actually. So they did really, really a good exposure of Preet Mandir. But then also a little later, the Dutch and Danish journalists contacted me. And it was basically not just a private channel or something, the government channels, right? Government-funded channels with sufficient budget for production. So, pretty simultaneously in 2007, the Danish TV exposed the Preet Mandir story and, also part of the Andhra Pradesh story in Denmark. As a response, Danish authorities first put adoptions on hold, stuff from India. But then they actually collided with the Indian authority, CARA, where we later found out that the chairperson of CARA was involved in corruption. He's also charged by the CBI by now. So
yeah,
it's all back to 2006, 2007. We are fighting since so long. So basically, they reopened that and basically said nothing is wrong. That's almost 20 years ago now. And actually, we have continued to fight. And, the CARA has been charged here, but it's still in the CBI special court, right? So it's going on since 2007.
Yeah.
At the same time, the Dutch media took up the story of Nagarani, whose child was kidnapped and being sent to the Netherlands. And I was already less optimistic than the reporter. The reporter could have been the same age like my sister, my younger brother, and he's really good. I have to say, he did the story very well, very simple, and he was called the Pitbull of the Netherlands as investigative journalist, and that was an investigative format. So they did actually 3 programs. So they did one program showing the specific case. And there's a second program, you're broadening it up, showing that it's not an isolated case, probably. And I had done all the pre-work for that. So I had already started helping the Nagarani and the other parents, getting legal assistance, and we filed a case and all that. So we also all had the documents from the court.
Right, right.
So we had all that. And the Dutch government opened up a 3-tier investigation. So basically, there was an ombudsman which looked into what the Ministry of Justice may have or may not have done wrong. The Foreign Affairs Ministry was supposed to look into what happened in India, 2007. And until now, it is not recognized that Nagarani's child indeed is the kidnapped child. So they covered up, actually.
Yeah.
So then there was youth welfare authorities who licensed or supervise the licensing of these agencies, who looked into what the Dutch agency may or may not have done wrong, and they let them off the hook. So this agency until recently was still practicing. During that time, there were a lot of talk shows and a lot of public debate about adoption and intercountry adoption. And one woman named Rudy Post was also, kind of invited to as expert in these talk shows. So now, I'm just an adoptee. I'm coming from the field. I don't really understand what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
Try to talk to Western authorities. They actually deny and cover up. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? I mean, I wouldn't have expected that. You expect, as you're German or Western, you would expect Indian authorities to be corrupt and, doing all wrong things. That's all the Western prejudice on India. But they are doing that? Like what? So, Rudy Post is an EU civil servant. Now, one has to understand the EU, the European Union. We are a little bit like the Union of India. So we have a lot of different states. We do not really have a constitution. We have a treaty which binds the European Union together. That developed step by step from a trade union to even in other areas. And in mid-90s, the EU or the other, after the Soviet Union broke, right? After that,
yeah,
then a little later, the EU wanted to expand, or whatever way, maybe the other states wanted to become member of the European Union. But when you are a member of a club, so the European Union wasn't that big. Yes. Germany, France, and other countries, let me call them the old EU member states. We are bound together by a treaty, which are basically the club rules, right? So if you want to join that club, you have to adhere to the club rules, right?
Yeah.
So that's explain the process, explained in a little bit simple terms. Of course, it's more complicated, and it's called the accession process. And Rudy Post was working in the Directorate for Enlargement of the European Commission, which is basically the administration, and was tasked with making sure that Romania complies with the club rules. In the old EU member states, we basically also exported children, mostly to the US. But since the UN Convention on the Right of the Child was implemented, we stopped that. We only import, but not export, right? We violate. Violate externally, but we take care of our own children. So we're not, and Romania was exporting 3,000-4,000 children per year. And why was that? Indeed, there was an issue around the early 90s. Yeah, obviously there were horrible orphanages. And everybody flocked into Romania and wanted those children. Obviously, those children, disabled children, you see, the orphanages were emptied very quickly, and then new children had to be found. But it became, specifically in percentage, one of the biggest exporting countries. And that state wanted to become a member of the European Union. And Rudy Post was actually the working bee, so to speak, carrying out that work of reforming the child protection system in Romania and making it compliant with the standards which we have in the European Union. That was her job. She also didn't know really what she's getting into, but it's not her private role. It was agreed by all EU institutions. To be clear, there are three main EU institutions. So the European Parliament, you would expect more power of the European Parliament, but these are just the representatives which are directly elected. So, yes, legislation has to go through all three, but the Parliament, for example, cannot initiate new laws. New laws can be initiated by the European Commission. The European Commission is the one actually who's the guardian of the treaty, basically making sure that everybody, stays in line with the club rule. And the European Commission also has the money, right?
Yeah.
So Rudy was working for the European Commission, which is one of the most powerful administrative bodies. It's administrative, not political, bodies in the European world, I would say. So then there is a Council of the European Union, of the EU, that is basically where the representatives of the member states then work. So these three institutions work together. And it was agreed within the three institutions of the European Union that Romania has to stop this export of children. So it was not Rudy's private hobby.
Yeah.
So the Rudy actually worked, and they reformed. They had also money. They gave Romania obviously also money to reform the child protection system. But Rudy really encountered the adoption mafia on the highest level, which you can do. From the US State Department, from even Romania was blackmailed by the United States, Colin Powell. Basically, if you don't export your children anymore, you cannot become a member of NATO. So that level of work. And really was, with the elections in 2004, the guards changed in Europe. And in 2005, Rudy was removed from her job. And the most powerful bureaucrat in Europe was Catherine Day, the Secretary General of the European Commission. That is the highest bureaucrat. We have the president is politically. But, the president depends on the Secretary General. So who's more powerful? I don't know. Anyway, that's a very powerful person who was also for a while Rudy's director. So she knows the file, and she basically told Rudy, okay, you write a book. Rudy wrote a book, Romania for Export Only. And that book Rudy actually published in 2007. That's why she was always involved in the talk shows, talking about in relation to the wave we created by exposing the Indian scandals. And then shortly after a while, I met Rudy, obviously, and we started talking. And then, it's like I came from the feed level and she actually came from the highest level. So then this knowledge combined made it very understandable.
Right.
He founded, and Catherine Day, who was the Secretary General of the European Commission, and Rudy Post had a kind of also personal relation, in professional terms, personal relation. So I was kind of wondering how that came, but Catherine actually had been earlier the director, so she knows the file, and I still try to figure out what exactly happened. But, basically, the European Commission wasn't giving Rudy any work, and Rudy wasn't coming to work, but she's a civil servant. So it's similar to an IRS officer. She was lower in grade, but, the conditions for civil service are similar. So it was Catherine Day, the secretary of the European Commission, who basically suggested to her to work for an NGO. But in this field, child rights field, UNICEF is one of the main culprits. Save the Children goes along. Many of the other child rights organizations were earlier involved in adoption, intercountry adoption, and the trafficking of children. So none of the NGOs actually helpful during Romania's accession process. So Rudy then asked Catherine Day, for what NGO? What if I found my own NGO? And Catherine Day said, okay, we'll look into that. So you have to imagine the highest bureaucrat next to the president saying that. So a few weeks later, ACT was being set up, and Rudy was seconded. That would be in Indian terms deputed. Seconded is a European term for civil servants, but it's if you you have some IRS officer now suddenly working for the police, and they're on deputation, right? And the same thing happened to Rudy, that she was seconded to an NGO to against child trafficking. that is a little bit crazy because it would be like a government funding WikiLeaks to fight the government.
Yeah.
But we were a little bit naive. We were hoping it will work out somehow. But this is how I understood it started from 2007, this is now 20 years almost, how big this issue is and on what levels it's being decided and done.
Yeah. So tell me, what is your manifesto, of your mission, let's say, of ACT against child trafficking and Adoptee Rights Council?
Adoptee Rights Council is, as it says, we don't really, it's about adoptee rights, but this is not my original work. My original work was defending children's rights.
Yeah.
ACT's clear-cut mission is to defend children's rights as defined in the UN Convention on the Right of the Child. And that was also a very technical legal thing that basically came out during the accession process of Romania to the European Union, because the UN Convention on the Right of the Child is part of the club rules. You cannot violate that. So the European Union, indeed, all three institutions insisted on the fact that Romania implements the UN Convention on the Right of the Child. There is a second convention, which is the Hague Adoption Convention. The UN Convention is from 1989. It's a United Nations Convention. It's the most ratified human rights convention treaty in the world, but only one country has not done it, the United States of America. And that was also already the problem during Romania's accession process, right? And because the adoption mafia, in fact, in simple terms, realized early 1988, 87, that during the negotiations of the UN Convention on the Right of the Child, due to the many scandals worldwide and for inter-country adoption would be limited, very limited. And it is limited in Article 21b. So inter-country adoption under the UN Convention on the Right of the Child is only permissible if there's really no other suitable manner of care. And even if India is poor now, India can take well care of their children.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so no need to export. South Korea can do that. And obviously Romania can do that. And all EU countries can do that, because basically there is no lack of money. The EU can print it.
Yeah.
Literally, almost. So and there are mechanisms, to get from Germany base, for, there are funds for that in the EU. For everything.
Yeah.
So there is no lack of money. And where did I want to go?
I was asking about your manifesto really for ACT.
Yeah, so basically it's very clear. ACT has been started in the wake of Romania's accession process. And we defend the UN Convention on the Right of the Child against also the Hague Adoption Convention, which is different. And the Hague Convention is only a private law instrument, private international law instrument. How can that change? So we're trying to expose that, which is difficult, but we have we've contributed not only us, but if you compare the numbers from 2004 to now, you had 40,000 plus minus inter-country adoptions in 2004. And now it's maybe 2,500 globally. So we really brought it down. And India can be really proud, all Indians. Sorry that I'm saying that. No, I'm saying German. Now I'm German, I can always change. But I'm saying, hey, India, you can be really proud. You're exporting, you're number one exporter now in children. Yeah, it's not funny.
Yeah.
So India didn't really, the numbers are not that high, but because of the fact that other countries hardly any adoptions, India is now number one. And then
what are the numbers right now?
I have to check on Kara website.
Okay.
500, something like that.
Yeah.
But the numbers are also not clear, because they're manipulating the statistics, in fact, because they do not count NRI adoptions as inter-country adoptions. So we have to look, they've been changing that from time to time. So we have to look into that to understand the statistics. So yeah, India is number one country. And also, of course, and then that comes together with Adoptee Rights Council, we want an apology. We want compensation. We want for the victims. We want redress schemes for the victims. And we want this practice to be ended. This is a crime. I have been, I'm German, so for me that term crime against humanity is very difficult. I'm German. My family, my adopted family is German. And obviously, it's a difficult history, as you know.
Yeah.
But also when we look now in the history, the whole practice of adoption as it's practiced today comes from the Nazis. So there was something called Lebensborn Project, to have a good breed, a high-end breed. And they operated the same way as actually today the adoption system is organized. And what happened that I only learned 2-3 years back, and that needs to be researched more. During the Nuremberg trials, these practices, Lebensborn, were termed charity and not crime against humanity. And I think I have made a mistake of calling it just trafficking or something, but it also really is difficult for me to use that term because the term is normally associated with German history, not very good way. And we should not occupy maybe that term, but that's why I was hesitant. But now for me, it's clear it's a crime against humanity. And if you create even a convention which legalizes something which is an utter violation of the UN Convention on the Right of the Child, then that is a systematic crime against humanity. There's nothing noble about adoption, like Indians believe.
Yeah.
Indians believe in adoption.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't find anyone in India doing the work we do.
Yeah, it's systematic. Yeah, you're right. On another note, I was just curious. You said that, you're continuing the search for answers for your father. So a lot of mothers are being found. You've helped how many? 76, 80 people now to find their parents. So what about fathers? Is it mostly mothers or are you finding fathers as well?
We're finding fathers as well, but what to do? And sometimes most of the mothers don't want to tell us, and then we can. There are some adoptees who have actually good relation to their fathers, and even sometimes fathers didn't even know.
That's tough. Yeah.
They didn't even know they have a child. It happens also. But often in cases where it was kind of abusive, then we basically respect the mother's wishes, and most adoptees also do. And often fathers are not recorded.
Yeah, of course.
You want to sue the mother to pressure her to say who's the father. Some mothers say it after a while. Some pretend they don't know or come up with other stories and things like that. These are very tragic stories.
Yeah.
But if possible, we try to trace the fathers as well.
But yes, all depends on the mother, really. Yeah, her comfort level. So how does it feel, Arun, to be in touch with your mother and your uncle, I believe, was uncle and aunt. He was with her, right? He supported her during the pregnancy. Have I got that right? So your mother's brother? No?
I don't really, no, I don't think so.
Am I confusing that probably with Natasha's case then? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. But anyway, so meeting your relatives in India, has that been nice? And I believe you wanted your own daughters to meet your mother. So all
No,
that
I
has
have
that
sons. I
been
don't have daughters.
okay. You have twin,
I have
boys,
two sons.
two sons. Okay, right. So your sons have met your mother, and how is it like, meeting this side of relatives?
It is the more time passes now, the more clear is a loss. So I don't want to glorify that. Obviously,
Yeah, yeah.
like that. And my children are not Indian, they're German. Obviously, my first partner and wife was a German. And my children actually carry the name, not my family name, or not my mother's name, or not my father's name. They carry the name of my adoptive parents. So I think we really have to look at the loss and not glorify these reunions. These are not the. I know people are. What? How was it? How nice to see your mother, and some TV shows are there who glorify reunions. I think it's very necessary to organize and have those meetings and reconnections. But we also have to understand that damage done cannot be repaired. You cannot bring back the time. So we have to acknowledge the damage. And the older I get, the more I realize, in my personal case, and also obviously for other adoptees, how grave the damage is. And it's not just by reunion that all is fine. No, no, no. For many adoptees, the reunion or meeting their mothers or knowing their story sets off a whole different chapter of healing that I can state, but it's not. It's really not like it's portrayed that this is just the cathartic, immediately heal and make happy.
Yes.
As I said, I'm not able yet, even though now I'm 8 years, and you can blame me for that, but I'm not able to communicate with my own mother. I mean, imagine you cannot talk to your own mother. Imagine.
Yeah.
So we really have to, as society, think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just like this warm, fuzzy feeling. There is a sense of loss, and it's a tragedy, really. We can't, negate that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the full tragedy. And one has to look, in my opinion, at the full tragedy, not just at that little moment meeting one's mother.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Arun, for doing this. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective and the work that you're doing. Thank you.